eyes, the first steps you're looking for, some of the different things you're looking for that eyes are doing or not doing as well as they could, and then next steps on training those things.
Absolutely.
Like.
Yeah. So first is just kind of understanding what is 20/20, right? It's just at 20 feet. If you're not 20/20, it's comparing how we see something that's sitting still at a certain distance, right? And then corrective lenses should put us on an even playing field. But I've had a lot of people come in and say, "Oh, I have great vision. I'm 20/15." It's like, okay, but that's we know better than to solely assess athleticism by one metric like strength. I've seen plenty of guys who are really strong, but if I, stole their wallet, I know they wouldn't catch me. It's like, so you have to be fast. You have to be flexible. You have to have nutrition, right? There's all these other boxes, and vision's no different. There's this myriad of skills that when we look at goaltending, nothing sits still. There's multiple moving objects. There's things. And so the first things that we would look at would be how the eyes work together as a team, turning inward and relaxing outward. So the terms for that would be convergence, which is inward, and divergence, which is outward. And so for the listeners, if you hold your thumb up 6 inches in front of your nose and look at it, your eyes will cross, right? I would say if there's a laser beam coming out of your pupil, each pupil, those should intersect those lasers at the object we're looking at. And so up close, it's more crossed, and straightforward, it's more, railroad tracks. They're just parallel. And so I'll use myself as an example on that regard. I was very good at convergence and super low at divergence. So for a visualization, think of somebody with kind of rounded back posture, right? Somebody who's on their phone all the time, right? So a trainer or a physical therapist would give me muscles to develop my back muscles and teach my chest muscles to relax. So likewise, most of my visual training revolved on teaching my brain to teach my eyes to relax apart. So what I experienced on the ice was just a wider field of peripheral vision and awareness. And that's huge, right? I mean, I was so lopsided that I would have preferred a breakaway over a shot from the point. I'm not exaggerating. Just everything up close, I was confident, but things further away, I would miss pucks I shouldn't. On the flip side, someone whose eyes have a more natural resting, relaxed posture, they will have trouble bringing the eyes in, and they tend to, you can compensate for this and you get really good at that, but they tend to just kind of catch things out in space. They get good at, the way they typically express it to me is, I've gotten good at knowing where the puck's going to end up, but they're not truly seeing it all the way in.
Raise his hand. And we just did a little test, and guess what? My eyes didn't converge very well, and it matched anecdotally how I feel. Like I rarely see a puck all the way in.
Yeah. And I appreciate that you didn't share that with me till after, right? And now I
had no idea what to expect. And I again, normals, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that affected me as a hockey analyst or me talking to coaches, because I assumed that, again, I'm 50.
Right.
And I just assumed that everyone else was the same. Like that, like a kid not knowing better. I didn't know that goalies could see it all the way into their glove, right? Because I never really did. And then we did the test, and it's like, this is why you don't.
Yeah. Yeah. And just, as you throw yourself under the bus in that regard, you did very well on the peripheral one. Right. And so, and I've had goalies, like high level goalies, once I explained the concept of convergence, divergence, I've had them predict their scores. I had a Division I goalie who said, I'm going to crush divergence and I'm going to be terrible at convergence. And he said the same thing. He's like, I read the play really well. I don't see the puck hit me, like, ever. And he was right. And so first would be kind of those x-axis things, right? And then some people have a vertical deviation, and that's a tough one, right? So one eye at rest is higher than the other, or it might be, when they're looking straight forward, it's fine, but as they converge, one goes up and the other one doesn't, right? So there are all these things that happen that are going to give inaccurate visual information to our brain, or conflicting images, and make things harder. So, and then within that, we're going to see, are the left and right eye being utilized equally by the brain? Some people will converge, but only their right eye turns in, right? So they can converge, but now they have to turn their head to keep things centered. And so if you're hearing shaking in the background, that's our office dog, Ollie.
Who is awesome, by the way.
Sitting on Kevin's lap. So next we're going to look at eye movements. This one to me is so impactful and then potentially beneficial or detrimental. So will my eyes go where I ask them to go? I equate it to, for listeners who remember the computer mouse with the little ball in it, if you did not have a mouse pad and you're trying to fill out a little Excel spreadsheet, it would be super frustrating, right? The cursor flies across the screen, or you have to roll it 3 times to move it an inch. And so that's a skill that I see that's big enough where it'll weed kids out of team sports, where they'll end up gravitating toward cross country or swimming or track, where it's just me and just a straight line. Now, I'm not saying everyone in those sports has this,
right?
But I've heard a bunch of stories.
It's harder to survive the ball sports or things like that.
Yeah, it's just too much, and that's a big one on the reading end too. But and so for some of our people, it's drastically deficient eye movements. But we worked with an NFL quarterback where we were checking his eye movements left to right. When his eyes moved from left to right, it was just like just beautiful, smooth fluid. Every single time his eyes went from right to left, they would just hitch right in the middle, like they'd take a quick little pit stop. That's a big deal for him. When he's making his checks to his receivers, that fraction of a second matters a ton. So depending on the caliber of athlete with whom we're working, we're increasingly critical, not in a negative way, but just we look for everything with these high-end guys because, at the end of the day, it's those little things. So in my years of doing this, people ask, what's normal? What's average? And I say there really isn't one because I see so many things. But some of the commonalities I've had, the eye movements are one of the big ones where once I hit Division 1 or higher, I almost never see eye movement issues. And if I do, they're minute, right? They're small. If I see something more significant, it's the person has most often had a recent concussion. And that's a whole nother thing we can get into is the concussions, right? But that tells me something, right? Where it's not, a scientific study, but it's almost 2 decades of experience and observation that I've seen high-end athletes compensate for low convergence. But the eye movements, I've not. I haven't had someone at that level with poor eye movements where these things matter. And again, that's not a glasses or no glasses thing. That's just, a different skill.
Okay. So now the good news is we can train this.
Yeah.
We can think whether it's a young kid to help him read.
Yep.
Or see objects and not 2 of them.
Uh-huh.
Or athletes trying to improve eye movement, convergence, divergence, so that we can catch a puck and see our glove. And you told me some stories of athletes you work with that have that aha moment where they've done the training with you and the convergence has improved to the point where, oh my goodness, I can actually see it in my puck. I see the puck in my glove.
Yeah. It's and I'll reshare what I told you is the favorite way I've had it expressed to me. A high school female goalie came in, and she was just like, "You guys wouldn't believe it. I saw the puck all the way from the stick, and I saw it go in my glove." And to a lot of people, they're like, "Yeah, of course you did, right?"
You're a goalie.
But if you don't have these tools, right? And so we said, "That's awesome. That's awesome." And she said, "You know how coaches are always just on you, like watch the puck all the way into your glove." And she goes, "I just thought that was a metaphor." And I just love how she put it. But it's these things, and that's where with all my years of coaching, I know how frustrating it is where it's just like, why can't you do this to a player, right? Now, vision's not always the culprit, but in some cases, I've had, I could find a video of a young lady I worked with, a defenseman. I asked her what the position she played. She said defense. I said, which side? Just honestly making conversation while I set up the gear. She said, they always put me on left D and I hate it. She pounded the table. I'm like, whoa, well, I've never heard someone hate their position this much, but I asked her why she's so fired up. She said, I can't explain it. When I have to make a play to my right, like D to D pass, I panic and I dump it in. But when I'm on the right, I'm fine. And then it was like 30 minutes later, we got to the eye movement stuff. Her eyes would not go to the right. It was like Pac-Man. It would go around in a circle. And then once it got high right, it would jump to the middle and then down to the bottom and wait for the target to catch up to her. Just wouldn't do it. And so in that case, let's say she's a goalie. Right? Like that would be her blocker hand, right? The standard approach would be like every day after practice, we're going to dump a bucket of pucks and we're doing blocker saves, 100 of them. And now like that, it won't resolve the root of the issue.
Right. Eventually you'll learn to recognize the blade release and all the information and know when a puck's going to the blocker, and you can compensate for it as a goalie.
Yeah.
But you're not actually seeing it if your eyes won't let you.
Yeah. And goalies with that issue, I've seen actually overturn their head. So their trailing eye is looking at it to avoid having to look to the side, where it's, so do you have the tools you need to do the job? And that's really what I come back to with all my analogies is, if a little kid goes into skating lessons, brand new skates, and mom and dad didn't know you're supposed to sharpen them. Johnny's going to fall and fall and fall. And you put him with a skating coach, and Johnny's a hard worker. Like, he's doing his best skating coach in the world. The tools are prohibitive. He'll continue to fall. And then, he's going to hate it. And
okay. So I want to get into the tools and how you train this. But I first wanted to ask, like, we've already established parents, optometrist. Now that's the base stuff.
Yeah.
But the next step in terms of measuring convergence, divergence, the eye patterns and how they move, you're in Minnesota.
Yeah.
I'm in Vancouver.
Yeah.
Are there online tools that will allow people to access that and learn those things through you, or do they need to go seek someone out, or can they do that through you online, or do they have to come to Minnesota?
Great question. So both are options, right? So the term for this type of training would be more vision therapy than sports vision training. So if you're not in Minnesota, that's a good place to look. It's just Google vision therapy near me. Alternatively, when you go in for that eye exam that I know you're all going to go get, you can ask if they're willing to do a little more comprehensive testing where they look at vergences and accommodation.
Okay.
So that's where they'll look at convergence, divergence, the resting posture of the eyes, any potential vertical deviations, and how well the eyes change focus or hold focus at different distances.
Okay, so that is something you could do through an optometrist.
Yeah, some of them. Yeah, okay. I mean most. It's worth asking, right? So,
okay.
A lot of offices, they'll likely have the equipment to do it.
Okay.
It's going to take longer than a normal exam, so it might be something for which you pay extra, which is beyond worth it. And alternatively, obviously, if you're in the neighborhood here, or if you're visiting Minnesota for a tournament, we can help with facilitating all that. And in terms of the training itself, we work with people all over the world. Right now, I've got goalies in Sweden, Finland, Czechia, Russia, Canada, and just all over the place. And so most of those goalies are goalies that we were hired to work with through NHL teams.
Okay.
And they're home for the summer, but it's Zoom stuff.
Can you do the assessment online? Or is that a little tougher?
It's a little tougher.
Okay.
It's best done in person.
Okay.
But once you've
got the assessment, you can do that remotely, work with somebody.
Yeah, and that's where if you determine that this type of training is something you want to do, I think and I'm the first to say that I'm not the top expert or most appropriate fit for different populations, different visual issues, but when it comes to goalies, it's hard. It's just such a good fit. It's just I know how to speak their language. Apply the conversations to the position, help the goalie understand why we're doing what we're doing, how it's going to help them. And then obviously, when we get into the eye hand portion,
right.
Everything we do is just very goalie centered.
So give me an example. Like, let's stick with the eye movement stuff, whether it's convergence, divergence. What would that look like in terms of training? Obviously, with you in person versus remotely, and what are some of the tools that will be required for it? Like, can you do some stuff online through a computer? Do you, we've seen the standard convergence, with the beads. I've seen that before. Are there different tools you can do at home, or what kind of, how
so it's
people are going to want to work with you. I want to show them how they can do it without having everyone come to Minnesota.
Yes. And so, a handful of years ago, if you did the remote stuff with us, I only did it at that time with contracted by an NHL team. Each guy got a Pelican case, big old suitcase. Yeah. And the gear was big.
Kind of stuff the spies would, handcuffed to their arm.
Yeah. And so